B'nai Yehuda sold its temple at 11th and Oak to the Salvation Army and moved into this building of classic Doric Greek proportions, as it is termed by the architect, Mr. Howe, H-O-W-E, of Howe, Hoyt and Cutler, the name of the architectural firm. Linwood Boulevard was known as the Boulevard of Churches. There were other religious buildings here in Greek style, which was a favorite in those days. There were Reformed Jewish temples, similar in style, that had previously been built in Louisville, in Cincinnati, in St. Louis, in Detroit. And so this was nothing novel for Reformed Jewish congregations, even though in ancient times, during the days of the Maccabees especially, the Greek and Jewish cultures certainly were distinct and different. There was seating for 1,200 people in pews, and the pews were ordered in a sequence of classes. The first class of the pews were towards the front. They had cushions on them in velvet, and even on Friday nights, people wanted to have their own seats. They could order anyone occupying them to move. That seldom was necessary because Friday nights was not a well-populated type of service. There were services also on Sunday mornings from 1910 until 1925, when Rabbi Harry Mayer gave pulpit lectures of 1 hour or longer, usually on civic subjects, seldom on any religious ones. Christian people were invited. It was done especially for them to show that Reformed Jews, particularly those who had come from Germany or other German-speaking countries, were not to be lumped together, as it was put, with those who had come from Tsarist Russia. The congregation remained here until 1957, when it moved to 69th and Holmes to occupy what first was a school building, and then in 1967 there was the addition of a sanctuary. It became more and more difficult for people to bring their children here on Sunday mornings, especially during World War II, because of gas rationing. And people like to be convenienced. They don't necessarily want to do what people have done in Europe, where they have built cathedrals that stand for 700-800 years, and people drive long distances on Sunday mornings. That is not true in Kansas City, nor is it true in most other American congregations. The building was dedicated in October of 1908. All 1,200 seats were occupied, and the Kansas City Times on the next morning featured the dedication as against a secondary story which told of the Wright brothers having set a new distance record the day before. The original windows on the west side and on the east side were by the famous New York artist John Lafarge, the inventor of opalescent stained glass. The glass in front had a backing in a different color in order to create a combination that was unique for John Lafarge in his day. He's well known in the East, better known, I should say, for the battle window at Harvard University, the peacock windows in New York and in Washington, D.C., and there's one of those now also at the Nelson Atkin Museum right here in Kansas City. These windows were in essence paid for by the Temple Sisterhood. Even though the congregation signed the checks, what the Sisterhood did was to furnish the entire building, relieve the congregation of that responsibility so that they could commission John Lafarge for the windows. The windows told a story in historical terms, Jewish people from ancient times to the modern period of emancipation. The story was dictated to Lafarge by Rabbi Harry Mayer, the rabbi of the congregation. The windows are now in storage at 124th and Knoll in Overland Park, the present site of the congregation. We're concluding our tour of old Kansas City Jewish life with a contemporary one, Rose Hill Cemetery. This was farmland at the time, 1919, that congregation B'nai Yehuda purchased these 10 acres of ground. The reason being that Elmwood Cemetery section of the congregation was pretty well filled up by that time. We're standing next to the grave and monument of Private Joseph Liebman, who was killed in France during World War I, presumably buried there for a time, and in 1921 reinterred here following a highly attended service at the temple on Linwood Boulevard, and then brought here in a caravan of cars. The Kansas City Post described it as the largest military funeral held in Kansas City to that time. After this monument was erected here, the Board of Trustees of the congregation decided that henceforth only bronze markers would be placed on graves. That is why the monument here for Private Liebman is the only one of its kind at Rose Hill Cemetery. The cemetery, therefore, is what is called a memorial park. That's a designation for cemeteries that have largely bronze markers. It's the second one in Kansas City, so designated. It has a distinction from other Jewish cemeteries in town. It is for Jewish deceased to be buried here, but if they had a spouse, those who had a spouse not of the Jewish faith may nonetheless be buried here as well. That is not the custom in other Jewish cemeteries locally. We're standing outside the Rose Hill Mausoleum, which was built in 1931. This was an undertaking of a private group of members of B'nai Yehuda, all of them downtown Kansas City merchants. The Katzes, the Wolf brothers, the Hartsfelds, the Bernheimers got together. They decided they did not want ground burial, which is of course the traditional Jewish custom, to place into the earth that which came from the earth. There's a Reform custom, and this company leased from B'nai Yehuda the acreage needed for this building, They had a contract to do this in 10 years, and after 10 years, they would return, well, rather would turn over the building to the congregation, and the congregation then would be able to sell all of the unsold crypt spaces, and the company promised that it would retire outstanding bonds that had been subscribed to by temple members for the purchase of Rose Hill ground to begin with, and would also have a perpetual care fund in place. Well, unfortunately, that didn't happen because of the Depression. In fact, the company, Rose Hill Mausoleum Company, could not even pay in full for the construction. So they were bailed out by the congregation prematurely, and the congregation then established a perpetual care fund, which is in good shape. The cemetery as a whole is well endowed with a perpetual care fund, certainly sufficient at this point to maintain the cemetery in perpetuity if inflation doesn't set in to a great extent. There are some notable people placed in this mausoleum, including two of the rabbis. Served B'nai Yehuda, Rabbi Samuel Meyerberg, who served the congregation from 1928 till 1960 and died in 1964. Also resting here is Rabbi William Silverman, who served after Rabbi Meyerberg and who died in the 1990s. There are family rooms here, some of them holding as many as 12 crypts, family members. Some families here that have 2 rooms of crypts. This is well maintained, beautiful on the inside. The tapestry on the main floor is a mosaic that was made in Czechoslovakia and brought here from there with a backing of paper, and then the backing came off during for the installation. The chapel is seldom used now. We do use it on the Sunday between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for a memorial service, unless weather allows having it out of doors.